Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to another episode. This is Zaid, and on the other mic is my wife and co-host Hiba.
Assalamu alaikum.
Today, we're lucky to have Hafsa Taher. She is a certified life coach and business strategist, also, mashallah, a successful business owner. Through her coaching business, she has, mashallah, mentored many women through life and business. Now, as a newlywed, she also offers insight and guidance around courtship and relationships. She shares many personal experiences and uses an approach that is rooted in Islamic values. So thank you for coming onto the podcast, Hafsa.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So mashallah, you've been doing this work for a while, as we can see. I know we've been following each other on Instagram, supporting one another through our entrepreneurial journeys. But is coaching or mentoring something that you've always had your mind set on, or is it something that just evolved organically with your audience?
A lot of it was really organic because my past is I used to be in IT, and that black and white thinking came really naturally to me. If it's plugged in, it's supposed to work. Sometimes it still doesn't. But I thought, this is a lot more simpler than people. So I stuck to IT, and then started a business in 2019, making handmade gifts, and then 2018 quit that business and switched to marketing and teaching. So it's been a journey. It's been a self-discovery. It's always been like, I've always thought of it as, okay, I have this experience. I've collected all these points, how in a game. And then like once you hit this milestone, the next level opens up. So and then I would ask myself, what's the next level here? So a lot of it was just kind of figuring it out step by step, day by day.
MashaAllah, you make it sound easy.
No, oh my God, you don't know how many nights I'm like, what am I supposed to do?
I'm sure it's not. Yeah. But working with high achieving women, what patterns have you noticed, especially when it comes to relationships and love?
Being in school, being successful in business, and relationships, very different set of skills and talents, right? I can talk about from my personal experience. I was like a straight A student, right? 4.0 GPA, and I wasn't even trying sometimes. I'm just like, I just want to be done. I had an internship job lined up. My internship was like, come back to us when you graduate. You have a job offer letter from us. And I'm just like, meh, don't care about my GPA. And I still ended up with a 4.0 GPA, right? So school was really easy, alhamdulillah. That's one of the things I just kind of knew how to navigate. Relationships, on the other hand, was like, there was no guidebook, there was no textbook, there was no answer cheat sheet. I'm like, I don't know what's happening here, right? Because it's very different skill sets, and it's also very different in terms of the kind of stuff you need to work on yourself. As a life coach, as a certified life coach, and also someone who's been into coaching, therapy myself for a lot, I've learned these things. Like in the business, you are like the decision maker. You are like deciding how things go. You're also very rigid. Like you maybe at beginning of the year, January, you're like, I want to make 100K. I want to make 10K, right? And then you're working like a plan, like plan A, plan B, plan C. Okay, this didn't work. Q1's done. What do we need to change, right? So it's a lot of you are the decision maker. There's a lot of control. You have a vision, and you have a timeline to execute. You're driven by outcome. But in a relationship, especially in a marriage, it's completely the opposite. It's a lot of just letting go, just surrendering. It's also co-creating, and the process can be really uncertain sometimes, can feel even messy. There's all these big emotions that are coming up, and you're navigating it with another person. Even if this person is from the same village as you, from the same school as you, from the same, you were born in the same hospital, and your parents have been neighbors for their entire life, right? Even at that point, they are still very different people. You both are very different people, and they come with their own perspective, with their own upbringing, with their own what life's given them, what lessons they've learned, right? So in a marriage, something that can be really hard for someone like me was surrender, right? And I think a lot of high achieving women who have become used to being in charge struggle with you are surrendering to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're practicing tawakkul. There's a level of trust and letting go that the business or demands, but relationships, next level. It just everything becomes personal. And that whole hyper independence that you're able to do in a business with in a marriage or in a relationship, you're learning to co-create, hey, let's figure this out together, right? Sometimes that protection from disappointment and hurt comes up, and a lot of people are scared of and I'm sure we'll talk more about this later, of letting that guard down. They're like, I'm going to stay in charge, I'm going to stay in control, because that's the only way I've known to take care of myself. But when you let your guard down, when you are obviously with wisdom, with tying your camel, When you let your guard down, you're able to soften, to trust, to be seen. It's just completely different. What ends up happening is just absolutely beautiful, but you have to allow for that.
For sure. You touched upon so many things that I want to unpack right now. But I think, Mashallah, you haven't been married too long. So, as you mentioned in your bio, you are still a newlywed, relatively speaking. But prior to getting married, I believe your business was pretty successful. Was it well established? And oftentimes, with girls, that becomes a major search criteria in assessing the right spouse, that they want someone who has achieved a similar degree of success, whatever it might be, entrepreneurial, it could be academic, social, whatever it might be. Was that the case with you to a certain degree, or was it not?
I had been looking for a long time. So I really had the time to be like, what is really important for me? There's actually a book called A Case for Settling for Mr. Good Enough.
Yes, I saw that in your Instagram stories. Yeah.
Right? That's one book. And there's another one called Elizabeth Gilbert. The name's escaping me, but it'll come back. There's another one called where she explores the need for marriage, like why get married. I mean, in her relationship, she has everything, right? That we Muslims don't have, but she has everything and her only question is, should I sign that paper or not? She goes through this entire journey in the entire book trying to answer that question for herself. What I really loved about, and to come back to your question, is understanding what your criteria is, right? Like, what is marriage going to do for me? What do I want it to do for me? How is it going to add value to my life? What am I looking for? And at the end of the day, like having all these criteria, when you're younger, you're like, I want somebody who is this much taller than me because the photos would look really cute, all these like metrics, that sound pretty amazing. Yeah. But as you get older, as you keep looking, you're like, what does it really boil down to? What does it really boil down to? For me, it was openness. Somebody who's open, who's open to learning, who's open to like exploring different thoughts that they probably have never had. They might say, hey, I've never had that experience. Can we talk about this, right? Just that openness was kind of like what I was looking for without even having put it in words. But when you see it, right? When you see it in other people, and when you see the opposite, somebody saying, nope, I don't get this, I don't believe this, end of story, right? So I think one of my main criteria is just that openness, being able to like have a conversation versus like, this is what I think, end of discussion. So my criteria wasn't like these and has to make this much money, like, yes, you have to be practical and be like, can this man support a family and things like that? If you want to move out, can this man allow for that, right? His income allow for that? But at the end of the day, like, I think I become also someone older, someone gone to therapy, coaching myself. I really had to dig down and say, what is that one thing that I want? What is that one thing that I feel like is the indicator that allows me to be like, okay, I can trust this person because he's so open, he's so willing to like listen. Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad you touched on the topic of the need for marriage. Now, how can you tell the difference between someone who says, a girl who says, I don't need a man in my life, as a survival mechanism, maybe because of trauma or rejection or bad experiences, and between it coming from a place of ultra feminism?
Yeah. I was thinking a lot about this because this comes up a lot, especially in the ultra feminism you mentioned. Like, I mean, we have been brainwashed with this messaging. We live in this environment, right? So even when you were little, there might have been cartoons with this subliminal messaging, right? About the woman being hyper independent. Like, I want to make sure we don't dismiss that. There's been trillions of dollars being spent on this, right? For a reason, right? So I want to make sure we don't just like assume that we came up with this on our own and then women are all deciding this on their own. Like, these were thoughts that were implanted without even them thinking. So that's one. And as adults, we got to choose and say, okay, do I want this thought in my head or not? Do I have to unlearn and undo this thinking that was ingrained into me because of media or whatever, right? Propaganda that I didn't even realize came into me. I started thinking this way. But also, I have this theory about how we came up to this thinking in the Muslim environment, and some of it might be just generalization for my part. But so what happened is they were our parents, our mothers, our aunts and grandmothers that had very less control or say in a marriage, right? So they felt like very cornered, they felt like helpless, they felt isolated in a marriage, and they felt like they didn't have much of a say in the marriage or a position in a marriage, right? So what they told their daughters to do is go get an education. Go get an education so you can you can rely on yourself when you need to, and you can you won't be as helpless as I am. You won't be as cornered and isolated as I am. That I don't have I don't have options now. I want to make sure you have the options. So what the mothers, aunts, and grandmothers, maybe mothers, aunts that generation did, is they sent their daughters to go get education. They said, become independent so you have a plan B. And I heard this scholar once say, like, if you are going into a marriage with a plan B ready, how committed are you to that option A, right? Like, if you're already saying, I have my backup plan ready, I'm going to go into this. Like, how committed are you going to show up as if you already have a plan B that's solid, that's rock solid? Like, you have a plan B of like, oh, if this doesn't work out, I know what I'm going to be doing. Like, that's the kind of mindset that can be very detrimental to a marriage, right? Because you're not fully going in to be like, inshallah, we'll make this work, right?
Yeah, it sounds like an exit strategy for for a business, right? Like that's what you
Right,
do for a business,
exactly.
but not for a relationship.
That's right. Yeah. And it's not very healthy, right? Like, I know a lot of women I talk to are financially stable. They can travel on their own. They're saving, they're investing, they're buying homes, right? And the question does come up, like, where do we go from here? Like, we have swung from one extreme of like women feeling isolated, women feeling cornered, and women feeling pressured, having no say in a relationship, having no options, to the other extreme of like, I've got it all, right? And I have to say, like, I've heard women say, I have so much stability in my life. If I want to risk it, it has to be worth it. Right? It comes from a place of self-protection. And maybe it's not so much the mothers who have done this. It's also like watching the mother go through something, watching an aunt go through something, watching a sister go through something. It's like, I'm not going to be that fool who puts my heart on the line, I'm going to be smart here. I'm going to protect myself, right? Like, it's a lot of self-preservation, I feel like, from women. And this doesn't get talked about, unfortunately. It really is coming from a place of like, I want to protect myself. But then like we've seen those two extremes where women want to be hyper independent, and women having no say in a relationship. But Islam is a deen of like balance, where men and women, they both have value. They both have roles to play that contribute to the whole. And it's not about one being better. It's about like unlearning that survival mechanism, instead of shaming it and understanding that it was about like protection, which I don't need anymore, right? Which can be like, okay, they needed it, but also I have the tools to learn how to find the right person that aligns with my values. I have the tools to like, take care of my emotional well-being. I have the tools to seek the help I need, right? So practical steps would be like unlearning that thinking, if that's something that the listeners are struggling with, to be like, why do I need a man? Going for therapy, like either while or working with coaches to be like, okay, help me unpack my values, help me unpack like my worldview, and align. And because like healing and growth can support your values rather than being pulled away from it.
SubhanAllah, it feels like in today's culture, each gender is operating from a place of su'il dhan in the other gender. And like you said, I have to have backup plan, I have to protect myself. They're going to take advantage of me. I'm going to end up in a bad situation. And what you were just saying about like mothers and grandmothers and aunties pushing the daughters to get education. I remember growing up, I would always used to hear it from my mother. The most important thing for a girl in her life is her degree. I never heard it's marriage, never heard it's her home and her family. You have to get an education, have that degree. Subhanallah.
And yes, there's a place for it, but in the context, in a bigger conversation. Like, yes, one of the things like we always we heard is, what if, God forbid, like your husband gets sick or he gets into an accident, like, and you need to become the breadwinner. You should be educated enough to be able to earn the living, and yes, that seems like a situation that some women have fallen and gotten into. Life has tests everybody differently, but like, I hear you, it needs to be in a bigger context of like, how can you become a strong woman, in terms of like being a strong partner, being a strong mother, right? In the context as well. Yes.
Yeah, it sounds like everybody is just kind of speaking from their own personal experiences, or whatever that might be.
That's right.
Yeah, so I often find times with girls, whether it's in my personal journey trying to get married and even professionally, that they conflate success with compatibility. That mashallah, girls these days, they're becoming business owners, CEOs, politicians, and the list goes on. And for them, a compatible spouse is someone who's at that level or close to that level, because only that kind of person will understand them and the struggles that they've taken to get there. So do you feel there's some truth to that, or is that just ego talking?
when we think of a successful woman, okay, so when people say, I teach Instagram marketing, right? So when people say, I want a successful, I want an Instagram that's like working, they only think of followers, right? Like, I want 100K followers, I want 10K. I don't know if you remember the time when you had to get 10K followers in order to get swipe up, right? So that became the only metrics people were after, right? So what I call these vanity metrics. Yes, the numbers look good, but at the end of the day, what's that doing for your business? So sometimes we take one metric and make that all about that thing. So we take this successful woman and make it all about her. But that's just one aspect of her. She's successful, and she could be practicing, and she could be humble, and she's emotionally intelligent to be able to put her ego aside and have an open conversation. So I feel like when we talk about a successful woman, we kind of put her in a box that has all these assumed characteristics that come with it. Successful as in, okay, she wants to be in charge. Successful as in she has her ego up her nose, right? So we come up with all these attributes to assume what a successful woman look like, when in fact she could be a completely different definition. Like Khadija was the alone who was successful, right? We don't associate all of those, but that's the culture that's doing that. So what is your question? No, what is your question?
So is there some truth to that compatibility does involves assessing whether or not that person is at the same successful level or
Okay,
not,
got it.
or
So
not?
I think it's really important for the woman looking to get married, or the man looking to get married, really think about what are the values I'm looking for. Values, right? And that could be, and the same thing with like someone saying, oh, I want a religious person. What does that mean? I want a successful person. What does that mean, right? Does it mean like numbers, or he has to earn this much, but he could be like drowning in debt, right? Right? Like, you have to see the full picture and really understand, what are you looking for? Am I looking for safety? Am I looking for financial security, right? So am I looking to have intellectual conversations with this person? And that's great. And maybe this person doesn't have to have achieved what you have in order to have intellectual conversations, right? And again, like, even when people say, I want a religious man, what does that mean? Because somebody could be playing tahajjud, but somebody could be really good at memorizing, like learning new things on the go. Somebody could be really good at like giving charity, right? So there's so many facets, there's so many layers to something like successful, religious. Like, it really comes down to being like, what do I want in a man? What do I want in a woman? And sometimes, that book I mentioned, Committed, that's what it's called, Liz Gilbert, Committed, which talks about what does a marriage do. And we have the role of marriage has changed over the years, over the decades, right? At one point, marriage was, I'll marry this nice guy I know from middle school or elementary school. I've known him all my life, and he's good. I'll marry him because this is what we do next. Now it's become, I want this man who's everything for me, who's my best friend, who's my therapist, who's my intellectual partner. I mean, these are all cups that can be filled by different other people too.
Right.
Like, you want to have this intellectual conversation, you can join this club where you have these intellectual conversations.
Exactly.
And this person, this man, this woman that you have in your life can be there for to co-create life, for safety, for creating beautiful moments together. Right? We can have other people to fill in some of these cups, I feel like.
Right.
So yes, if you're looking for a spouse who's exactly at the same level as you might be saying no to people that actually might have been an amazing potential spouse. You might just be throwing away opportunity, I would say.
Yeah, Hiba and I joke sometimes that with our clients, it feels like they're ordering a burger. They want all the right condiments. They want the meat cooked a certain way. They want the perfect order. But we're talking about human beings. We're not talking about food. And human beings don't come that way, right?
Yeah. Like, that's also like really having to dig deep and say, if I want somebody who's like somebody, a woman or a man saying, I want somebody who's like 5'10", really digging deep and saying, why is that important for me? Right? And maybe like when they dig deep, and it might just come down to like asking that multiple whys, and it might just come down to, oh, I want us to look good in photos. Oh, my mom made a comment about somebody else's photo, and it always stuck with me. Like, it might just come down to that, like, whose voice is it in your head? And when you pull that card out, the entire house crumbles down, right? I've had that.
Oh my God, I wish girls like really internalize this. You have no idea how many times we come across people who make perfect matches, honestly, at least on paper and from our conversations with them. But because he's a little bit shorter than she wants, sometimes he's even taller than her, but shorter than her criteria, she wouldn't even consider it. And like, we are burning inside because he's a great catch.
That's right.
And they wouldn't even consider it.
Yeah, that is really unfortunate. Like that vanity metrics that we get stuck on, height, and all of those little things. And that's when you have to dig deep and like, why is that important for me?
Exactly.
Like, what am I?
Yeah.
What meaning am I assigning with this? Right? Like, on the day of judgment, like, is the height going to be the reason why you enter Jannah? Like, he's entering Jannah, right? He's taking you with him because he was the perfect height and he got free admission to Jannah. Like, like really have to dig deep and where is this thought coming from? And that's where life coaching, that's where therapy, that's where like working with, maybe even like having conversations with experienced older women who've been married for 10, 15 years and be like, will this matter in like 15 years when I'm in your shoes after being married for 15 years? Is this something that I would still care about, right? So I think there's a lot of like inner work that goes into looking for a spouse.
Yeah. When we ask them in all honesty, like 99% of them say, I don't feel attracted to a shorter guy. And then you can't say anything to that. Like, you're attracted to what you're attracted to.
It is.
That's it. Yeah. And like one of thinking was thinking about, a lot of women do say like, I'm open to marriage, but they are they fully emotionally available for a relationship, right? I've been there myself, and things I've seen is like saying things like that, oh, I'm not attracted to this, without giving it a third chance, right? Without giving it a third chance, without being open-minded about it, without like maybe even meeting this person in person and being like, I want to just give it a chance and see, right? Like even like shutting down conversations too soon, being like, oh, he said this. It could be a beige flag, it could be a flag, but oh, red flag, run away from this, block this person, or he said this, right? Instead of being open and being like, hey, I'm curious, what do you mean by that? Can you help me understand where that's coming from?
Yeah.
And sometimes like when you're chatting, I mean, the days we live in, the age we live in, like there's a lot of like apps, there's a lot of like chatting back and forth, but just get on a phone as like adults, you wouldn't do a business meeting or like on chat, right? Like sometimes even like emailing back and forth, you'd say, let's get on a phone, right? Why not do that with something that is going to like really like decide like the next chapter of your life, right? Get on the phone, meet this person in person, and really fully put your heart out there. Put your heart on the line and be like, this is a potential. Treat it like a potential, right? Coach would always tell me, this is not the last guy on the world. Just treat it like a potential, but fully like really consider it, without like shutting it down, without your trauma, without your past experiences, without your self-protection coming on and being like, red flag, I'm out of it, right? We're so quick to call any flag a red flag now, right?
Yeah.
Really just exploring to be like,
Yeah, Zaid likes to say that we live in a Netflix era where you just want to swipe.
Just binge through every guy possible.
That's it. And it seems like there's an endless amount out there, right?
Yeah.
Subhanallah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Seems like,
Yeah. Let's move to guys. What would you say, and we hear it a lot, what would you say to a guy who feels intimidated by a successful woman?
Well, I just want to add one thing before you answer that, because guys naturally, they're prescribed with the responsibility to lead, and so they want to maintain that status and dignity as qawwam, as the leader or caretaker, and they don't want that to be compromised, especially when they see a girl who's so successful out there in the world. So what advice would you give to men who at the same time want to still retain that?
So I spoke to other men to get perspective about this, because who am I to speak on behalf of men? So I was like, you guys tell me, what did you have to do in order to become confident? Whether this woman has like 56,000 followers, whether this woman has like a successful business, whether this woman has been out on her own and doing things, right? What did you have to do, or how did you have to work on yourself to be like, okay, I can have a conversation with this woman without feeling intimidated, without feeling threatened, right? Without feeling like this won't work out, right? Without shutting it down before even giving it a chance. So one, I think men also have to understand the point we talked about earlier. When we think of successful women, let's not compartmentalize them and like have these all these automated stereotypes attached to them. Like, she could be practicing, she could be humble, she most of the time she is, right? She is down to earth, she's really open to like has emotional intelligence to be able to like have proper conversations, right? So men don't reduce them to one trait. Like, you lose the full picture. And then when you're thinking about like, let's say this woman is used to running things on her own, like business, solo travel and all of that, and she might be used to like being in control. So thinking about like, okay, this woman has lived life like this. At the same time, she understands that marriage is different. right? And an emotionally intelligent woman understands about marriage is a partnership where we work things together, right? It's about like really understanding, making the other person feel seen and heard. And a good man understands all of that. So to answer your question, what do men need to do? Number one, someone really smart once said to me, like, respect is earned, not demanded. So making the woman feel seen and heard, right? Like that's also like, maybe she's had her fathers, her other men in the family who've always been like my way or the highway, right? So maybe she's had men like that, and unfortunately in some cultures men haven't really lived up to the responsibility of what it means to be a man, right? Like I was listening to this podcast the other day where Umar who would say, like, if there's an animal that trips and falls in Egypt, I'm going to be questioned about it. Like, these men really took responsibility seriously, right? I want to make sure like nobody's harmed under my rule, under my kingdom, not from a place of like ego driven, but I'm going to be asked by Allah about this, right? I'm going to be asked about this, so I have to make sure I take care of these people. I have to take care of this woman. So one, like, making it a safe space for women, but also respect being earned, not demanded. But also, like, when you're having these conversations, right, like really understanding what kind of relationship are you looking to have, what kind of relationship is this woman looking to have. And they all families I've seen that are matriarchal, and they're families that are patriarchal, like they're families where the woman makes all the decisions, right? So maybe she grew up in that kind of family and she thinks that she'll be in charge, right? So really just understanding, okay, what do you foresee a future family to look like? How do the husband and wife work together? So you really have to dig deep and be like, okay, understanding like, where is this woman coming from, what are her expectations, right? And what are her expectations in terms of like division of labor, like traditional roles, or maybe there's something else that she thinks might work better for her future relationship. Sheikh Yasser Bajaj said a really, really amazing thing once. Like, he's been doing like finding your Mr. Right kind of workshops for like over 10-15 years now, right? And he's been in the marriage, he's been having conversations, and he's been talking to people looking to get married for like a number of years. He said something beautiful. He said the Prophet ﷺ had multiple wives. One of his wives, one of his relationships, one of his marriages was like where the woman sent the proposal for him, where Khadija radiallahu anha said to a friend, can you ask about this man, about the Prophet ﷺ? I'm interested in him, right? And he said, no, I don't think I'm ready for marriage. And he sent a message back, and she sent a message back. So this was a marriage where the woman asked, kind of took the first lead, took the lead. And then we have the marriage with Aisha radiallahu anha that was arranged by the parent, right? So we see so many different kinds of relationships in the seerah. We see women that are successful, like with the word we use, right? Successful, wealthy, rich, right? We see relationships, we see the Prophet ﷺ having relationships with so many different kind of people. So there's so much we can learn from the seerah, but we have kind of like reduced Islam to, this is the traditional role, this is the only formula that works, where the woman is younger, where the woman, this is the age gap that needs to be there. Like, we have come up with all these stories that our culture has taught us, but we need to kind of go back to the deen and be like, what does Islam talk about this? So to answer your question, how do men not feel intimidated, is one, not summarizing them to one trait and really exploring, really talking to this person to kind of see like, what else is about this person I want to find out, like what are her values, how easy is it to talk to her, right? But also respect being earned. Like, you have to show up in a role where you are being the safe space, and you are like being a safe space for her, even when you're just having a conversation. Are you like letting her finish her sentences? That's wrong, right? Are you listening? Are you like taking part in the conversation? Are you adding to it versus being like, no, this is the way I do things, end of discussion, right? So being like really respect being earned, and then having the conversation about like, what kind of marriage are you looking for? So if the man is looking for maybe traditional roles, what we call traditional roles, right? So, and the woman's like, oh, I want to be earning, I want to be able to like do this and this, right? So maybe there's a mismatch there, but really just understanding where two people are coming from and having that honest conversation, that deep conversation about, what do I need, what do you need, what do we need together.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought the topic of conversations. Let's be practical and precise.
Yes.
What conversations should a couple have, especially if we're talking about a high-achieving woman? What conversations should they have before marriage in terms of roles, responsibilities, leadership, decision-making, even? Because sometimes some successful women, they feel a little bit edgy. Any kind of like mention of leadership, they take it as control, as they're
Yes.
being
Yeah.
controlled.
Or compromise.
That's
Yes.
right. And that's actually a question, great question that potential couples can ask each other is how do you define male leadership, right? How do you define male leadership? Because each of them might have never thought about those answers, but really thinking about, okay, what am I looking for? What have I seen that doesn't work? Maybe it's not, I don't know what it's supposed to look like, but this is what I have seen, and I know that's not Islam, right? So really exploring what does male leadership, without being triggered, without your ego coming online, putting your ego offline, disconnecting the Wi-Fi signal on your ego and being like, hey, can we explore what male leadership looks like? But you're right, because we have seen bad examples, right? We have seen how that leadership can be used as a controlling card, as a card to like my way or the highway, right? So you're right. So sometimes it can be triggering, and for women, if male leadership is triggering, you have to go back to the deen and like ask yourself, what is the true definition of this? What does qawwam even mean, right? What kind of responsibility? And same for men. Like you said, like what do men have to do in order to not feel intimidated? Is like self-awareness. What are your strengths? What are you bringing to the relationship? And I understand men can be reduced to that one number of how much do you make, right? 100% get it, right? So like they themselves have to be like, okay, I am more than how much I make. I'm this person. I add this value to the relationship. I bring this. Like they themselves have to know what value they're bringing to the relationship. So self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and also this is what the men have told me is working on their physical and their appearance, right? Like being fit. And it's not about fitting this numbers again, like fitting this formula out there, but really being presentable, being like working on yourself to look presentable and being fit. Because like as a man, you might be okay, let's not but let me not finish that sentence. So as a man, if you are you have to be fit. Everybody has to be fit. Everyone has to be fit. But as a man, to work on your confidence, self-awareness, even learning the deen, like learning about investments, learning about budgeting, learning about all these topics that your future you will need, right? Like being able to like learn all these things to build your confidence, and also working on yourself physically as well. But to answer your question about like what conversation should you have, something that I highly recommend now is premarital counseling. Is because the thing is that if someone's never been married before, you don't know what questions to ask. You don't know what questions will be an issue. You don't know what are the top things that will break a marriage, right? What are the top things that will cause conflict in a marriage, right? I mean, we have never dated anyone, we have never been in a live-in, we've never had all these experiences, right? So we don't know what to ask sometimes. So premarital counseling will bring up those topics. So now instead of you being like, oh, I don't know how to ask about the money question, I don't know how to ask about the intimacy question, premarital counseling will bring it up, right? They will say, what are your what are some assumptions about this you have? What have you seen in your parents that has worked? What have you seen in your parents that has not worked? How do you see money? What are your spending habits? All these questions really come up in premarital counseling. That's one. So go for premarital counseling. Most of them will have like some kind of like a course component where you watch videos, and a workbook component to it. And then like some of them might have like an add-on where you work with an imam or like a therapist, where you're both able to bring up, like they ask questions, you both are able to have conversations in that. So premarital counseling is like really affordable now, is really accessible. There's so many organizations that do it. But then also the questions about like what does marriage look like for you? What kind of roles do you assume that you want in your future relationship? What does male leadership look like? Money being a big one, right? How do you communicate? So rather than waiting for passively figuring these things out, or feeling like, the biggest thing for women is I'm going to lose control, right? I'm going to have to give up control. I'm going to have to like be under this person. This is your time. This is your time to ask all the questions, right? Ask questions about like, how do you see a relationship working out? Is it where the man just makes all the decisions, or is it like a co-creation? Is it a partnership where we both have different strengths and we create an experience that each one of us wouldn't have had independently, right? So really just asking those questions. This is your time to be smart. This is your time to be wise and proactive, and asking those questions, to bringing up those topics and being like exploring those now.
Okay, Hafsa, an honest question now.
Yes, please.
Are we overcomplicating marriage? Like, look, We have books, we have courses, we have counseling, we have
matchmakers,
podcasts, coaches, all of that. And look at the generation of our parents, our grandparents. They didn't have any of that. Sometimes they even got married without seeing each other.
That's right.
And at the same time, look at the divorce rates at their time and at our time.
Okay.
Like, is this all just a hype or what exactly?
So our parents sometimes got married without even looking at each other. Our parents didn't have proper conversations the way we have a list of 150 questions to ask before marriage, right?
Yeah.
Right? They didn't do all of that. But look at the consequences of that. The divorce rate was low. Why? Because they didn't have options. There was so much stigma with divorce. One, it was not even an option. What would the woman do? She didn't earn. She didn't have her parents to go back to. Was it her choice to stay in that relationship, or was it out of, I have no options, this is the only option I have, right? So yes, the divorce rates were low, but why, right? Were they all successful marriages? Were they all happy marriages? I don't know, right? So yes, you're right, we might be overcomplicating it sometimes, but at the same time, we are not those women. I can speak from the woman's perspective, right? I don't know about the men. But as a woman, I know we're not the same, especially if you're older, if you've seen the world. I mean, women got married at 18, 19, 20, 21, right? Now women get married in the 30s, right? So completely a different personality. Someone who's seen the world, someone who explored themselves, who's more self-aware. Like when you're 19, you're still figuring it out. When you get married, oh, you know what? They're both learning, they're both growing together in some ways, right? But now when you're looking at a woman who's in the 30s, who's in the 40s, she has a set of values. She knows what she wants, right? So I don't know if it's fair to compare like their marriages with our marriages, right? And again, like, yes, it's not about finding the one person who fits all these cups. Like I said, like going back to that book, finding the case of finding a good enough man, right? It really talks about in there, like, what did people look for in the past? What do they look for now? Whereas the book Committed talks about like more about like what is the purpose of marriage, which are absolutely both of the really important books that I was just like mind blown by those two books. The combination of like marrying a man who's just good enough, like how many criteria can you have, right? Like I had once, like Sheikh Muhammad al-Sharif Rahimullah told my friend, have top 3. She made a list of 10, but he said top 3 things. That's it. You want 3 things that you want to look for in a spouse, and that's it, right? 3 things. And if this person has it, you want to just be able to consider him genuinely and see what you want to do, how to take that further.
Isn't that too much compromising?
That's a great question. Maybe, but again, like if that's your top 3 values, then is that compromise, right? Or maybe that's being realistic to be like, I'm not going to find someone with a list of like 150 questions, answering 150 questions exactly the way I want them to answer it, right? Top 3 things, if they have that, then I feel like they are more likely to be an amazing spouse. I want to consider this. Obviously, get your parents involved, get like elders involved. Maybe you're not seeing something they will see, but really just to show, like, make your list, take them to the next level. Top 3 things. But yes, compromise, absolutely. But isn't that life? Sometimes you want that perfect ice cream, and you're like, it has to have these sprinkles on it, and it's not available. Then you do settle, right? You do settle with the next best option.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gluten intolerant, so my options are very limited. Am I compromising? Hell yes. But do I have to? Hell yes.
Yeah, to add to what you're saying, though, with regards to options, so Hiba and I dedicated, I think, we did a video on this about the illusion of options. That at the end of the day, we overlook the fact that we are still a minority here in the West, right? Like, we comprise of, I think, in Canada, about 3% of the population is Muslims, if I'm not mistaken, right, Hiba?
Closer to 5. Closer to 5.
That's still so low.
Yeah.
And yet we think we have a sea of options that we can just explore through, and we can just pick and choose, when we don't. Like, there has to be a certain degree of compromise and willingness to make the potential match work, right?
Yeah. I know the word compromise comes with a lot of like negative connotation, but really, if my top values are being met, the rest is just nice to have, right? So when you look at it like that, you're like, I'm not compromising on these. These are deal breakers. These are the top 3 things that I absolutely have. Everything else is nice to have. And can we have conversations about those, right? Like, are we able to come to a conclusion? Are we able to come to some terms together to be like, hey, I know you want this, but this is what I feel more comfortable with. Can we work something out, right? Maybe they might say not in the first year, but I promise you in the second year we'll look at this, right? Like, maybe there are conversations you can have, and you're able to trust this person to say, okay, you know what, he's giving me my word, and we're able to create this partnership of trust and feeling seen and feeling heard and being able to like rely on this person, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like, yes, we might be overcomplicating it. One of the things that he talks about in that book, finding a case of a good enough man, is that pool is small. Like men can marry like older and younger. Women are generally looking for same age or older, generally, right? So for women, like if you are looking for if you're someone in your 40s, 30s, there's a huge pool of men that are already married, so that's gone, right? Or men. So if you are if you are in your 30s, 40s as a woman, like one has to be Muslim, has to be in at least some sort of geographically close enough neighborhood area that you can travel to back and forth. You're not looking for someone on the other side of the world, right? So the pool is small. The pool is really small, and then add to that like number of number of Muslims in the West, right? The pool is smaller and smaller and smaller. It's not getting bigger as you get older.
Yeah.
It's not automatically as soon as you hit this number, it's going to open this whole world of opportunity. So that book really tells you, okay, the pool is just getting smaller for you, and as well as the way the people are moving on. So you have to like understand, what do you want in a relationship? You have to really think about like, what does marriage mean to you? The other book, Committed. What role is marriage going to play in your life? Because in some generations, in some cultures, it was just about, this is how the society works. You get married, have kids, and this is how the society works. You need women in the house, you need men in the field, right? This is just how society worked. Now we want our spouse to be everything. So really, those two books, the Case of Good Enough and also Committed, what the pool is not getting bigger. What do I really want, and what does marriage mean to me? What do I want it to be in my life?
Wow. Okay, you touched on this in the beginning of the this beautiful interview. I just want to go back to it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's say I'm a very successful woman. I make God knows how much. I have my own home. I have a great pool of friends. Have a lot of hobbies. My family is great. All of that. Is it worth it to get married? What would marriage bring into my life except for exactly? It's just gonna bring more responsibility, more control, more burden. Is it worth it?
Yeah, and especially that fear of losing everything I have, that stability I have, that control I have, and I have a good life now, right? And except that one part that Muslims are not able to participate outside of marriage and intimacy side, not missing anything else, right? Again, like you said, I have a travel buddy that I travel the world with, who we schedule our calendars and we both take vacation at the same time. And maybe you're traveling, maybe you're having a great life, buying a home too, right? Taking care of your parents. So what's marriage going to add to it that I don't already have? I think you really have to ask. It's so funny. You won't know that answer until you actually get married. I know most single women don't want to hear this. They're like, what do you mean?
I agree. I
what
absolutely agree.
Because it's a world that you've not seen, right? It's a world that you've not experienced, you've not felt. So the way I look at it, instead of thinking of like the independence, the hyper independence as a threat, or like I'm going to lose my identity, like extra responsibilities, like you said, right? You have to think about like, yes, you might be good at so many things, but there's some things you're not good at, right? You might be great at finding the best spots in Turkey to eat at, but you might not be good at listening to the waves, listening to the waves and just enjoying a beach, like really just getting lost in the moment. As someone who's like a doer, right? I sometimes don't know how to be, right? So like each of us has strengths and we have weaknesses. There are some things we have never experienced because that's just the way our environment or our responsibilities we have had to do, like the safety part, like should I pick up food here and have something for dinner, or should I go out in the dark? Like when you're solo traveling, there's so much, right? Even when you're traveling with a friend, you still have a sense of like, I have to be responsible for myself, kind of like the safety part, right? So, but when you're in a relationship, when you're in a marriage, when you're in a partnership, you are able to rely on the other person for strengths that you don't have. Maybe you're great at problem solving, but you struggle with listening. Maybe you are feeling like, okay, if I rely on this person, I'm going to lose myself, but you're not seeing the beauty of what someone else can bring into your life. They can show you a whole new world because of their perspective, like you've never had. Like, subhanAllah, like in the Quran, like we are told the spouse is like a garment. No other relationship's described like that. Right? A friend, a brother, a parent is not described like that. a spouse is someone so close to you, like your clothing is, right? So imagine to be able to like rely on them for things you don't want to do, things you're not good at, things that you just able to split the responsibilities. You take care of this, I take care of this. Also, like, be able to see a world from a different perspective, right? It's so hard to like put these things into words, but you have to trust the fitra, right? Trust the fitra. There's a reason why marriage was created. There's a reason why a spouse is called a garment. There's a reason why, I mean, when you feel safe in a garment, you feel comfortable in a garment, this garment that's so close to you. And that getting people so close to you can be scary for women. Getting somebody to become so close to you, because that illusion of control, that hyper independence, right? But trusting the fitra, trusting what Allah has created for us. Somebody said, like, what you experience in marriage is kind of like a glimpse of what you experience in Jannah, because you do have spouses in Jannah too, right? So yeah, like, how we look at the fruits of Jannah in this world, like there's fruits that we know are also going to be in Jannah. Like marriage is one of those things, right? Marriage, having a spouse, is one of those things that's also going to be in Jannah. So really, instead of thinking I'll lose myself, what am I to gain, asking yourself, how can this person add beauty, ease, goodness, and health to my life? How can we complement each other? How can I be inspired by them? How can I be, rather than feeling like how will I be diminished by them? So I feel like when you find a relationship like that, inshallah, I pray all the single women and men find a relationship like that, you're able to taste a different part of beauties that Allah has created in the world, in this world.
Beautiful. I absolutely agree with you. A single woman will not know what it's like, or a single man will not know what it's like to be married. It's like,
yeah.
No, I was just gonna give a funny metaphor of
Yes.
like somebody who has never had chocolate before, and they look at, what's the big deal? This like a brown block, so what? Like, but once they try it, they become hooked, right?
That's right. That's right. And you know what? Marriage does come with challenges. You have to be like this whole emotional side of things. It brings up a lot of emotions. It can bring a lot of like triggering a lot of like past experiences. Maybe it's not empty of challenges. It's never going to be Jannah on this earth, right? Everything is hard. Being single is hard. Being married is hard. And the question just becomes, why do you want this hard thing, right? Why are you pursuing this? Is it because like Allah's, they promised something in there, Allah's told us what's something beautiful in there, or like there is a good intention for it? Maybe you want to say single, and that's not sinful in according to a lot of scholars, right? But there has to be an intention for that too, right? And I have a friend who wants to be single to take care of her parents, because in her mind, when she gets married, she won't be able to take care of her parents. Right? That's the story she's made up, and that's the story she's telling herself, and maybe that's true, maybe, yeah. But really goes back to like, what is your intention? Why are you doing this? To please Allah? Then it's all khair.
SubhanAllah. I feel so warm and fuzzy right now, honestly. We always try to give hope to people, our clients, just people in general. Marriage is really beautiful. Like you said, it comes with challenges, but it's better to go through life, to go through life experiencing these challenges in marriage than not to have that at all.
And there's no need to be afraid of challenges. You know what? Life is going to be challenging, right? Like the diamond that gets sharper and brighter with every rub, right? And Maulana Rumi said, the wound is where the light enters.
Oh, wow.
Right? And I'm going to stop at that mic drop.
It is a good mic drop moment.
Beautiful.
The wound is where the light enters.
Wow.
SubhanAllah.
Yeah. So I saw something on your Instagram stories that really stood out to me, which was this idea of settling. And there was a sister that asked you a question that she had been looking for 10 plus years, and she was ready to give up. And do I settle or do I hold on? And you said something really, really good, which was that when with you and your husband, that you didn't settle on your non-negotiables, and that there were only 2 or 3 things, and settling is knowing your priorities and finding someone who's imperfectly perfect for you. So what, if you don't mind sharing, and if you did, what were your 2 or 3 non-negotiables?
It's been a while since I looked at that list, but I'm going to try and remember. I don't remember the exact wording, but that's what I mean. I do remember the top values that I had. I think, like I mentioned in the beginning, like being able, someone who is open to listening, open to like a different viewpoint, right? It's funny, I actually remember what I said. Usually I forget. So, but that was, I think that openness was really big on my list, because that openness shows humility in a person. And I have to demonstrate the same thing. I can't just expect it from the other person and be like, I'm right, I know all the answers, right? Like, and there are times when I have to ask myself, is this my ego? Or is this because I think this is the right thing to do? Is this my ego? Is this my ego? Okay, no, it's not my ego. I think this is the right thing to do. So, okay, I'm going to insist and we have to do it this way, right? So really putting your ego aside, and sometimes like you have to challenge yourself to do this and like be open to the other person's perspective. Hey, help me understand. Like working for, like when two people are sitting across each other, one person sees a 9 and the other person sees a 6. But when you come on the other side, you're both looking at it the same way and you're both seeing a 6. So instead of sitting across each other in a marriage, bringing the other person over, when you're going over and saying, hey, show me your perspective. I want to understand this, right? So someone who is like open, well, it's such a vague thing, but when you see it, you know what? Practicing, and to me that meant has the basics down, not the hajjat. I was like, and some things that are hidden, the only Allah knows, the state of the heart, what they do in secret, right? I want to make sure the basics are down, because I want to make sure this is something that we continue for future generations, inshallah, right? So the basics, we don't compromise on that. The openness, and yeah, I'll leave it at that. There were a couple more private things, but yeah, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Hafsa, I can listen to you for hours, honestly. Like, I feel like you know all the right things to say. SubhanAllah. No wonder you're a coach.
Alhamdulillah, I'm happy to hear that. Honestly, I made dua like this benefits, all the people that are looking to get married, they find all the right answers they're looking for, because really self-awareness as a man and a woman, this is what I've heard from the men as well. Self-awareness, knowing yourself, learning about the other gender, like especially we live in such segregated environments. Oh, we're not supposed to look at the woman, we can't talk to her. How are you going to know what the woman wants, right? What is she really after?
Yeah.
Especially now that maybe your mom is very different than the spouse you're looking at. So self-awareness, I would really say, and being able to understand the other person.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was actually going to ask you one. Sorry, say?
Go ahead, finish what you were going to say.
I was just going to ask you one last advice you would give to anyone who's looking, maybe on the brink of giving up, or maybe they're not giving up, but they're just tired and burnt out.
Yeah. That's the other thing. It's an exhausting journey. When you put yourself out there and it doesn't work out, you're back at it again, right? I actually messaged Dr. Jinan Yusuf, Ustada Jinan Yusuf, and I told her, I don't even have the energy to make dua. I'm just so done. I don't even know how to make dua with passion anymore, because I'm just so exhausted. What do I do? And she, Dr. Jinan Yusuf, if you're not familiar with her work, she is the author of the Names of Allah book. And I was attending her course with the Suhaib Web Academy. She was doing like a course, going through one name a week. And her book is beautiful. If you have never picked it up, I have it somewhere here. So I asked her, I said, you know what? I'm just exhausted. It's so draining to put yourself out there, your heart on the line every single time. Oh, wait, this didn't work out either. And I asked her, what do I do? I don't even see a hope to make dua. Like, how do I make dua now, right? She said, go to Allah and complain about all those things. Go to Him with your pain. Go to Him with your struggle to make dua. Go to Him with all of that you're feeling. Like, He is the one who responds. He is the one who is your wali, your trustee. He is the one who provides. He is the one who opens. He's the one who guides. So yes, you're struggling, but that doesn't mean you struggle by yourself. You still rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you go back to Him with that struggle. And she said, complain all you want to Him. Tell Him how hard this has been. Tell Him how you're struggling. Tell Him, like I think that relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with Allah, like especially understanding His names really helped me in my business too. And I came up with this mini course that talks about like 9 or 10 names of Allah that help you in your business as a business owner, right? Because the world teaches us you don't have anyone to rely on, like that hyper independence we were talking about. And I was listening to a podcast with Dalia Mugahid. Yes, Ustadha Yasmin Mugahid's sister Dalia Mugahid has a podcast. She was talking about how the Musa alayhi salam's staff is something he literally leans on, physically leans on. And Allah is telling him to put it down. It becomes a snake. It becomes a sign of Allah. So the things we rely on, it's one, relying on something, someone is not weakness. Relying on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the ultimate source of strength, but also your spouse, you're relying on someone, is that thing you're relying on is also a sign of Allah, right? Is the thing that Allah sent you your way. So going back to the names of Allah, like I really feel like that changed a lot in me, on what I thought about business, about like I have to do this on my own, that self-reliance. I don't have to do this on my own. I have Al-Fatah with me. I have Al-Razaq with me. I can always call on to these attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and make dua to Him to help me, to guide me, to open doors for me, open doors that I didn't even know existed.
Wow. I want to read that book.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. If you can even like attend, like watch her recordings, watch her classes, it's just the way she shares her experiences, it's beyond the book, but absolutely beautiful. Dr. Jinan Yusuf, absolutely beautiful.
Okay, we'll look into it,
Inshallah.
inshallah.
Okay, go ahead, Hilda.
Sorry, you do it.
So before we wrap up, how can any potential client reach out to you if they want to seek your services, seek your assistance? How can they find you?
Best way would be Instagram. My Instagram is hafsataher.coaching. That would be the best way to reach me. There should be a link to even email me if it's a longer request and the DM character limit is running out. But Instagram would be the best way to find me.
Okay, inshallah, we'll link that in the description of this episode. We're truly, truly grateful to you for this beautiful advice. Sometimes all it takes is just for a person to listen to just one word that could change their life. So I hope, inshallah, people find this in this episode. May Allah reward you, grant you lots of success, and bless you with your husband.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you guys having me. Like I said, it's not an easy journey. I want to make sure the listeners understand that. But we have tools, we have people, we have a lot more available now than I had when I was doing this. So reach out. It's not a shame to ask for help. It's not a weakness. And I wish all your listeners all the best.
Inshallah.
Okay.
Inshallah.
Until next
time. And to our beautiful listeners, inshallah, we'll see you in the next episode. Assalamu alaikum.